And joining us now here on the program, pleased to have back with us Christine McCracken, Senior Analyst of Animal Protein with Rabobank, Rabo Agri-Finance. Christine, great to have you with us here on the show once again. I hope you're doing well.
I am. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, and good to see you as well as we talk about the Global Pork Quarterly for quarter one of 2023. Sounds like a little bit of caution out there in this pork market, in this pork industry. New report here from Rabo Research, Christine. And just if you can you give us the 1,000-foot view, the highlights here, just to start off our conversation today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we broke any new ground. I think everyone's pretty much aware that it's a rough start to the year. We had a lot of protein kind of hanging on the market here in January. That's put some pressure on margins, and I think it's not just here. It's in around the world. The pickup from China maybe hasn't been quite as fast or furious as we all were hoping for, and I think that may be on the come, but I think there's some questions about the consumer and how they're going to react to higher price protein, and especially in a weaker economic environment, and that we raise in the report. And at the same time, we continue to face pretty high costs. So tough start to the year, I think, for most of the industry, especially here in the U.S.
Well, let's look a little bit regionally as well. I know this U.S. herd has been at an inflection point here. Talk about some of the findings that you guys found when it comes to the hog herd here in the U.S.
Well, I think that as we think about the opportunity for growth here in the U.S., and we've gone through kind of a few years now of declining herd size, so we're really looking for the green shoots, and what might create some opportunity for growth. And part of what we were thinking, for later this year, is that we'd have some opportunity for increased demand around this big hole in the beef supply that we're going to have, creating some opportunity for pork and chicken. So for the hog herd here in the U.S., starting to think about when we see that inflection point, and in that December report, obviously, some indication that guys are starting to think about, increasing production. But it's a really tough time, I think, when you're seeing these kind of losses, especially now to start the year and some of the uncertainty. So I wouldn't say we're going to see a lift off, any big
Hmm.
quick increase, but I do think that we're starting to see a little better health in some areas, maybe some opportunity for growth, tied to that drop in beef supply that we're expecting.
Now, I know you mentioned China. China, of course, is a big point here to watch, I think, in the global pork industry. We've seen prices over there really take a hit, plunging, and a lot of it, I think, tied to COVID. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the situation when it comes to China's pork industry right now.
Well, they've had a really tough time. Obviously they'd started to recover and then got that really locked down. So they really didn't have much of a local market for their pork, and those producers still facing, some pretty high costs. Global feed markets are still very expensive. And again, when you have a weak consumer, it's just really tough to know when to expand. So they were sitting on a lot of inventory, through the end of last year. And I think you started to really see not just things start to recover a little bit as things opened up, but maybe a little bit of improvement in cost. So now they started to see a little bit of recovery in the outlook for their markets. Started to see some increase in production, but they continue to face, obviously, a lot of challenges tied to ASF in some regions. Still a lot of uncertainty about how quickly that market's going to recover. And so, again, I wouldn't look for any massive uptake in pork out of China. There's still a lot we don't know about how that consumer will react. But I think there's a good chance that there will be room for both Chinese pork and U.S. pork going forward, as we see it.
Now, Christine, you mentioned ASF, African swine fever. I know that is a hot topic in the industry. Japanese encephalitis virus, JEV, is another issue out there. We have PRRS issues in some parts of the US. So, different diseases out there. In your research, in this report, did you guys look at some of those factors when it comes to disease and how that could impact the outlook for pork here in 2023?
Yeah, and I do think that we continue to face those challenges. I think a lot of it is about management and making sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our animals as healthy as they can be. I know that we've really stepped things up here in North America, both in Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. But when we think about it from a global perspective, I think disruption creates opportunity in some cases. We saw that with ASF. Obviously, when they were struggling, JEV is in some parts of the world, like Australia, been a big disruptor. You think about just the global protein supplies being really challenged in some regions, and that's why it's so important to have production spread throughout the world and really be able to kind of offset some of those shortages when they arise. This year, a lot of the disruptions been in poultry. We talked about that before in terms of high path. That creates again some opportunity for the pork industry to go in and really fill some of those holes so that consumers have ample supplies of low cost protein to in their stores.
I know as well, we do have high feed costs here right now, especially in the US. Is that something that we need to watch out for when it comes to the pork industry here through this year as we maybe try to fill some of those holes, especially left by beef, et cetera, Christine?
Well, it's a really challenging cost environment. We looked at obviously not only where prices are now, but what we're thinking for the second half. And I don't see a lot of relief, right? We've got tight global supplies. There's obviously a lot of things that can impact that relative to this South American crop, especially the second crop, the safrinha crop. So, um, right now I'd say that the Brazil's coming in as expected, probably a little better. I think we saw that in today's WASD, but the reality is that China still matters, and that feed demand out of China matters. So, assuming we got a recovery in China, just think of what that could do to U.S. trade. Not to mention, we're still sitting here in front of a spring crop that conceptually still has a lot of risk, right? Every year. So I think that we need it all. I think even with a good crop, it's still going to be pretty expensive, and that's probably a constraint on our U.S. producers.
Well, Christine, before we wrap it up, a lot of great research and insight. I know we'll make this link available on our website as well. Any final thoughts you would have for us just looking at this latest report, looking at pork here from Rabobank?
Well, I think it is really about this global balance. So when we think about the opportunities around the shrinking U.S. Cattle herd and what that could mean for our pork industry, I am relatively positive. I do think that high retail prices until this point have been a bit of a challenge for moving a lot of product. I do see maybe some relief coming there. So there's some green shoots, as it were, to get positive about when we think about the outlook uh, for 2023.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate the time with that. Senior Analyst, Animal Protein with Rabobank, Christine McCracken. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you.